The Snake and the Mirror. Vaikom Basheer. Has a snake ever coiled itself round any part of your body? A full blooded cobra? All of us fell silent. The question came from the homeopath. The topic came up when we were discussing snakes. We listened attentively as the doctor continued with the tale. While discussing the topic of snakes, the doctor asked a group of people whether a poisonous snake had ever coiled itself around any part of their body. This question made everyone silent because they became fearful. The doctor started to tell them the story while they listened attentively and silently. It was a hot summer night about 10 o'clock. I had my meal at a restaurant and returned to my room. I heard a noise from above as I opened the door. The sound was a familiar one. One could say that rats and I shared the room. I took out my box of matches and lighted the kerosene lamp on the table. Now the doctor is telling the story. The incident happened in a hot summer night at 10 o'clock. He returned to his room after having food from a restaurant. When he opened the door, he heard the familiar sound of rats with whom he shared the room. The house was not electrified. It was a small rented room. I had just set up medical practice and my earnings were meager. I had about 60 rupees in my suitcase. Along with some shirts and dhotis, I also possessed one solitary black coat which I was then wearing. He was staying in a rented room without electricity. He was in the initial stages of his medical practice and had only a little income as earnings. Only things he owned were some shirts and dhotis and a black coat that he was wearing then. I took off my black coat, white shirt, and knots of white vest and hung them up. I opened the two windows in the room. It was an outer room with one wall facing the open yard. It had a tile roof with long supporting gables that rested on the beam over the wall. There was no ceiling. There was a regular traffic of rats to and from the beam. I made my bed and pulled it close to the wall. I lay down, but I could not sleep. I got up and went out to the veranda for a little air. But the wind god seemed to have taken time off. He removed his clothes and hung them up. Then he opened the windows to get some air. The room in which he stayed was an outer room with one wall facing the yard. The house was tiled one. The room did not have ceiling. The rats travelled along the beam. He prepared bed and lay down to sleep. Since he could not sleep, he went out to have a little air. But the wind god had taken a holiday, so there was no air. I went back into the room and sat down on the chair. I opened the box beneath the table and took out a book, The Materia Medica. I opened it at the table on which stood the lamp and a large mirror. A small comb lay beside the mirror. He moved back to the room and opened a book, The Materia Medica, at the table. There was the lamp, a large mirror, and a small comb on the table. Now let us consider a few important words and meaning. Coil, wind or reel. Full-blooded cobra, a venomous snake. Homeopath, a homeopathic doctor. Came up, arrived. Tale, story. T-A-I-L, tale. Tale of a dog, cat, etc. Had a meal, ate food. Noise, unwanted or unpleasant sounds. Lighted, set fire, start a fire. Set up, ready, established. Earnings, income. Meager, very little. Possessed, owned. Solitary, single. Take off, took off, remove. Vest, a garment often worn under shirts. Outer room, room outside main part of the room. Antechamber. Gable, the triangular upper part of a wall at the end of a ridged roof. Beam, structural element, resists loads applied. Ceiling, upper interior surface of a room. Make bed, the act of arranging the bed sheets. Time off, time for rest, took leave. Beneath, underneath, below. Comb, a toothed implement for grooming the hair. Beside, by the side of.